Thank you to our sponsor, Stitch Fix. Get the star treatment with your own personal stylist. Try Stitch Fix today at stitchfix.com/cult and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/cult for 25% off today. stitchfix.com/cult.
Thank you so much to our sponsor, The Farmer's Dog, the pet food of choice personally for my dog, Fiddle. Yay! Listeners get 50% off your first box by going to thefarmersdog.com/cult.
Go to thefarmersdog.com/cult for 50% off your first box.
That's thefarmersdog.com/cult for 50% off your first box.
The views expressed on this episode, as with all episodes of Sounds Like a Cult, are solely host opinions and quoted allegations.
The content here should not be taken as indisputable facts. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. This is Sounds Like a Cult, a show about the modern day cults we all follow. I'm Issa Medina, I'm a stand-up comedian, and you can catch my tour dates on my Instagram.
I'm Amanda Montell, author of the book Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism. Every week on our show, we discuss a different fanatical fringe group from the cultural zeitgeist, from Disney adults to momfluencers, to try and answer the big question.
This group sounds like a cult, but is it really? And if so, which cult category does it fall into? Live your life, watch your back, or get the fuck out? For our new listeners,
a live your life level cult is like a baby cult. Definitely fanatical, but mostly harmless.
A watch your back level cult is borderline dangerous, checks off some of the culty boxes, but isn't totally destructive.
And then we have a get the fuck out level cult, which is like QAnon level Manson vibes, aka run for your life. After all, what classifies a cult is up to interpretation. Issa, I feel like you have a really good mom, but was she a PTA mom?
That is a good question, Amanda. Thank you so much for asking. No, she was not involved at all. Silent H.
Pronounced H.
Pronounced H. At all. She was not involved at all. I mean, I remember when I first moved to America, first grade, and that was when I got introduced to the idea that like people's moms brought in cupcakes for their birthdays for like everyone, right. You know, that was like
this was a trauma for me as well.
Yeah.
And glad we're already getting into it.
Yeah. And I was like, it's my birthday. Where's my mommy with my cupcakes? She didn't come to get me the cupcakes, and it was embarrassing. And then the next year I was like, bitch, you better bring me some motherfucking cupcakes.
I was the same. You know, we had some working moms. Our moms had jobs.
But my mom worked from home. So like,
oh, no excuse.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very legitimate excuse because she did still work from home. Like she was like at her desk working all day.
Right. We cannot minimize the WFH lifestyle that we both lead.
Because also she was also like a stay-at-home mom and a work-from-home mom in that she like cleaned the house, made us breakfast every day, made dinner every day. Like she was very much like a mother who did it all while also working like an 8-hour day. So like, but in my mind, I was like, bitch, you're at home. What are you doing?
Right, you know? Right. Anna Maria was a domestic goddess and she was bringing home that bacon. And yet there's always a reason to criticize a mother. They do get the short straw, the short end of the stick, whatever idiom we want to use.
They get the popcorn at the bottom of the bucket.
Yeah, exactly. I will say, when I was in elementary school, I was rather jealous of the PTA moms, but I knew that my mom was never going to be that mom. I grew up with a lot of gender parity in the home. So like if my mom was expected to do something, like my dad would be doing it too. My parents are like a two-headed hydra. They're just like the same. So like there was no way that my mom was going to be a PTA mom because like both my parents were working the same job. They're research scientists. And so the idea of my mother like being involved with my schooling, as charming and quaint and homey as that might have been, and I was jealous of kids who had PTA moms in elementary school, it just was never the case. I will say though, and I don't know if you felt this way or if this was your situation, but once I got to high school, I was very grateful that my mom was not meddling in my school life because I have authority issues.
Yeah, I feel that too. I was definitely grateful. But quick backslide into the elementary school thing. I think like a lot of the moms who were very involved, it's because they didn't necessarily have a full-time job or even like a part-time job. And then that's where like that dynamic, and like the shaming comes in of like moms who have the time and space, which is still very much like a job for them to like be involved in school, shaming like moms who aren't involved in school. It's like, there's only so much time in the day, ladies, you know? Like
that's a new voice.
It's a new voice. And my mom, she didn't bake a fucking brownie my whole childhood. Like, I was the baker in the household, you know? And I used to bake goods for them to take to work.
Aw, you were a PTA daughter.
I was a PTA daughter.
Yeah, you know, let me get up on my soapbox. The cult of the patriarchy will always create a scenario where women are in conflict. So it's like there is this war between working mothers and PTA mothers, and who is the best mother, and what is the best family, and who are the best kids. And I think that the reason why we're doing the cult of PTA moms and not the cult of like, it is parent teacher association after all, it's not mother teacher association. But the reason why we're covering PTA moms is because America affects women in a more cultish capacity a lot of the time due to, you know, the oppression. And the culty dynamics of the PTA don't have just to do with gender, I want to say. Like, there is some socioeconomic stratification up the wazoo in here, and we'll get into that. But Issa, maybe we should get a little bit into today's topic and the background of the cult of the PTA and its moms.
Yeah, I mean, when did it start? Because I don't think that like it came out of the blue. I don't think that schools were founded with a parent-teacher association. And honestly, some schools have more of a foundation to one than others.
So very true.
According to the National PTA website, which they have, of course, I wonder what mom made that. Okay, coder alert. Women in STEM or people in STEM. People in STEM. The National Parent-Teacher Association is a nonprofit that was founded on February 17th, 1897 as, and I quote, the National Congress of Mothers. So I guess even though it is the Parent-Teacher Association, it does have its roots in motherhood. And it was founded by Alice McClellan Burney. Oh, she has two last names. Go off, queen. Phoebe Apperson Hurst, also two last names. Both of them. Alice and Phoebe founded this National Congress of Mothers at a meeting in DC of over 2,000 parents, teachers, workers, and legislators. And so I guess they all got together and they were like, blah, 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 blah. What do ba, ba, be? And then
they were like, the kids need help. The kids need help. And the kids need help is a really great reason to start an organization that may or may not one day develop into a cult, because kids do need help.
And isn't that how all cults start? You know, like there's always like a positive reason below the trauma. But
that's right.
Today, the National PTA is composed of 54 state congresses and over 20,000 local units in all 50 states, usually in elementary schools.
Yeah, so it's become quite the little household name. Like, it has become an institution. It wasn't a little pet project. They were like, we are becoming a national organization.
I didn't know it was like such a legitimate organization. Like, I thought parents could just like show up and like help little ESL kids with flashcards like they did me. You know?
Babe, no, you got to pay dues. There are rules. There is recruitment. Fuck? It's cultier than you think, but this is not like a baby little fringy cult in the woods. This is a cult that's trying to rub elbows with the government. It's actually wild how institutionalized it is. So let's talk a little bit about what the PTA's aims were and are. So it is the largest volunteer child advocacy organization in the nation. The National PTA claims to be the, and I quote, conscience of the country for children and youth issues. And through its advocacy, as well as its family and community education, the National PTA has established all these different programs and called for legislation in areas including the creation of kindergarten classes, because some elementary schools don't even have them. They advocate for hot and healthy lunch programs for, get this, because this says something about me. I didn't know that the PTA was a group that called for mandatory immunizations, because for some reason, and maybe this just reflects the cultiness of our culture right now, I kind of think of PTA moms as a little bit anti-vaxxer vibes, no?
I do too. I kind of agree with you. I would say that like right now when I think of PTA moms, I think of like mommy bloggers, mommy influencers, kinds of people who like are maybe a little bit anti-vax. But if you think about it a little more deeply, and because it was founded in like the late 1800s, I can see their roots being in actually like more structure, because it is such like a government adjacent organization that they're like, no, we want our kids to be safe. And like no one was thinking of these policies. And it was probably moms who were like, my kid can't be sick because my kid needs to go to school because I need to go to work, who were like,
it was more establishment. It was more
establishment.
Yeah, I suppose I hold that stereotype in my mind because I think of PTA moms as having some privilege. But I will say the PTA, like many cults, was founded due to the failure of a larger system. The primary purpose of the PTA is to raise money for the elementary school, and they push relentlessly for more federal education financing because the federal government provides so little. These stats are nuts.
According to Parent.com, an article called In Defense of the PTA Mom, about 83% of funding for K-12 public schools in our country comes from the state and district. So the way that like public schools work, if you didn't already know, is that like most of the funding comes locally, and it's associated with essentially like the property value of your neighborhood, which is like why you see like better public schools in higher income neighborhoods. And this is my opinion. There are mothers who have more time because they're wealthier, because they are stay-at-home moms. They have time to volunteer at the school and then advocate that their kids' school get more public funding. And so in turn, that gives people with more money more public funding because they have someone to advocate for them.
It's a feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. And the federal government share is only about 8.3% of funding for public schools. So like most funding comes from state and district and local funding.
And private sources, specific grants, outreach programs. This Parent.com article said that in an underserved or sparsely populated district, the PTA helps to fill discretionary budget gaps. However, to your point, the districts that need the PTA the most don't often have very active PTA parents due to overall systemic inequalities.
Yeah, I feel like that would actually be like a good nonprofit for someone to make, is like if you want to like volunteer locally, volunteer as a PTA mom for another school that needs it, you know? So it would just be like the moms who do have an abundance of time go and help like other schools.
Medina 2026, or whenever you turn 35, which for the record is in
100 years.
Okay, here's what's culty. There are these historical power imbalances in the PTA that not only exacerbate general marginalization, but also contribute to the culty PTA mom stereotypes that we'll get into in a second. So listen to this. According to a 2001 study and an article by the Brookings Institute, Detroit's PTA membership plunged to 1,200 people from 60,000 people in the early 1970s in the wake of white flight and intensifying poverty. The PTA has actually been shrinking ever since then. So there's been this wild decline in membership in local PTAs from a peak of 12 million in 1966 down to only 3.5 million in 2020.
And I think this is a point that supports the cult of teachers, and that's just what I'm calling teachers because that's what we do on the show. But it supports the idea that teachers in lower income neighborhoods and public schools are really overworked because they don't have that additional help from PTA moms. Like a lot of times PTA moms serve as maybe like a volunteer in the classroom when classrooms have like more students than they can handle with one teacher. And then it's these teachers who are in lower income neighborhoods that are taking on not only more work in their day-to-day in the classroom, but also like outside of the classroom, you know, supporting the students who need it. And again, like you said, the word, it's a negative feedback loop.
Totally. And us continually using the word PTA moms and that being such a recognizable phrase in this culture really emphasizes how we're all in the cult of believing that so much unpaid labor and domestic labor and child rearing, whether it's unpaid or paid too little, falls on the shoulders of women. Women are expected to fulfill these roles, even in homes where both parents are working. It's just like the default attitude that moms are supposed to be in the PTA and supposed to know how to bake fucking brownies, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, that also very obviously highlights the point that it is work. It's literally work. Like, just because you are a stay-at-home mom who doesn't have like a traditional job, one, you're already like doing a lot of the household labor, but then on top of it, you're volunteering, getting out of the house, helping out of school. That is literally a job that a lot of schools need, and resources that make them better.
This sort of gender disparity, and there are other kinds of disparities as well that contribute to the cultishness of the PTA, connects to why it's been declining in numbers. So some of the reasons why the PTA has shrunk so much is that only 20% of American students live in two-parent households today with a single wage earner. And that's down from over 50% during the PTA's heyday in the 1960s.
I feel like when you first read that stat, it sounds like it's like people have a lot of divorced parents, but it's a single wage earner in a two-parent household. So that means that most two-parent households are actually just two wage earner households, and which means that both parents are working. So that means that like even if the parents aren't divorced, it just means that like they don't have time to volunteer because they're both working.
Yeah, like it's hard to live in America these days. It like just is, period.
I do not know how people can afford anything right now.
I know things have gotten so expensive, but wages have not increased. So essentially, you know, teachers are now reporting that only about 60% of parents even attend parent-teacher conferences. And this leads to the PTA becoming more culty because these time and energy demands create a self-selective PTA, meaning that most of the remaining PTA members, this 3.5 million stat, are these sort of sometimes culty PTA mom stereotypes that we all think of, these sort of elitist, toxically ambitious, competitive moms.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying is that it is literally a privilege to be a two-parent household with a single wage income.
Definitely.
It is not something that the majority of America can do anymore. It's probably either happening in a neighborhood where people had to move their lower cost rural areas after they've been priced out of costly cities or costly suburbs, or it's probably in the 1%.
It's all making sense now that we're talking about it, why PTA moms have such this culty negative stereotype, because we fail to think about the privilege of even being able to show up to a PTA meeting and perform that labor. There was this New York Times article from 2021 where a mother named Heather Osterman Davis, who has a chronic illness, noted that she could only become involved in her child's school during the pandemic when everything moved to Zoom because she wasn't able-bodied, you know? Like the PTA has just ruled out a lot of people through socioeconomic imbalances, racial inequality. It's not just about gender.
Yeah, or non-traditional professions where like if someone is working in the evening, like they can't make the PTA meetings in the evening. And it's like, why weren't they already moved to Zoom? Like, who needs to go to the school?
I know. I know. It is wild when you think about it. And again, we've been talking about feedback loops, but it's like if only the most privileged parents, most often mothers, because there's privilege, but there's also gender inequality going on at the same time, are able to volunteer for the PTA, then they're really only advocating and vocalizing their demands, their needs, their wants. And that means that the PTA just becomes even more insular and more culty, and single parent families, lower income families with unforgiving schedules like don't get the advocacy that they actually need more.
That literally affects the education of like thousands of children and the children that follow, and then like how those children are brought up and what colleges they go to, whether they have access to the right resources, and then who they become as adults. Children are like at the base of our culture.
Whitney Houston said, "I believe that children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way."
She was really onto something there about like them being the future. That is so true. Like they literally grow up and they become the future. And meanwhile, we stay the same age because I'm going to be 21 forever.
Okay, so If we're talking about the cult of PTA moms, we cannot ignore the stereotype that they are so often competitive to the point of like a little bit of violence. And to portray those dynamics, we do want to tell one absolutely wackadoodle story of a culty PTA mom gone wild.
This is exciting. I'm excited for this story.
It comes from the year 2011. There was a woman named Kelly Peters. She was living in Irvine, California, Orange County, a very, very culty hub. Lots of QAnon yoga moms down there. She's pulled over by police after a call came in with a fake name, but it was pitched as a real name, of course, who claimed that they had seen her car driving erratically and that there were drugs all over the place. So the police pull her over, and indeed, there were drugs all over the place. Yanan Wong for the Washington Post reported that she responded, "Please, they're not mine. I swear they're not mine." On the day that these drugs were found in Peter's car, she took a sobriety test and was brought in for police questioning for 2 hours. The police asked her, "Do you know anyone who would do this to you, who would like frame you?" Because she claimed the drugs weren't hers. And she said an answer immediately came to her mind. There was one person, without a doubt, a fellow PTA mom named Jill Easter. All right? She was certain that Jill Easter had planted these drugs in her car. Now, there is a 6-part Pulitzer Prize winning series on this story in the LA Times by a guy named Christopher Goffard. But here's a long story short. Kelly Peters, this lady, she was the PTA president at her school in Irvine and the director of the after school program. And she was targeted by the Easter family because they thought she had insulted their 6-year-old son the year before. They wanted her fired, but she was not fired. So they planted drugs in her car and called the police.
I wonder what the insult was.
I know.
Like, you're so fucking short, stupid little kid. That is actually definitely like not cool or okay of Jill Easter to do, but ride or die fucking mom right there, dude. Like, I actually applaud her because like nobody got hurt, and the other lady kind of like had a rude awakening about being mean to 6-year-olds.
But it was an alleged. It was an allegedly.
Oh, she had allegedly insulted her 6-year-old son?
Yeah, they thought she had insulted their son.
I mean, sometimes kids can be mean and need to be insulted back, okay? I'm just kidding.
You're devil's avocadoing a lot right now.
I'm devil's avocadoing myself, and I'm devil's avocadoing left and right.
Basically, this is just a story that illustrates how tense and fanatical and zealous to the point of violence the pressures of elementary school motherhood can be, and the tensions in the PTA. They can go to a really culty place. So it's time to talk to some moms.
Women who have true life experience mothering and raising children, because their children are raised. Their children are up and out of the house. So joining us to talk about the cult of PTA moms are the amazing hosts of the I've Had It podcast, Jennifer Welch and Angie Pumps Sullivan.
These guests were recommended to us by a listener. Thank you so much for tipping us off. Jennifer and Angie are going to give us the inside scoop on what it really feels like to be in the cult of PTA moms. So here's our conversation.
I love Stitch Fix because they have a range of wear now styles, in-season ready colors, trends, and patterns to help refresh your wardrobe. With Stitch Fix, you can get a personal stylist who will curate the perfect pieces for your unique style and fit. Get started now and bring some new life to your wardrobe this season.
Think of Stitch Fix as your style partner. Your stylist will learn about your tastes and collaborate with you on looks that you love. All you have to do is answer a few questions about where you typically like to shop and what you like to wear, your price range, stuff like that. And with your choices in mind and a wide range of sizes available from extra small to 3XL, they'll find your perfect fit.
Now that summer's around the corner, my summer outfits are dusty musty from last year, and I also don't know know what's necessarily in style. So it's nice to have Stitch Fix to tell me like, okay, here are some new looks, and also let's personalize it. I love that with the skirts I've been receiving and shorts, because I never know what changes have come these new seasons. You know what I mean?
Try Stitch Fix today at stitchfix.com/cult and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/cult for 25% off today. stitchfix.com/cult. Thank you so much to our sponsor, The Farmer's Dog, and thank you also to you listeners. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. Whether you have a few weeks old puppy or a senior who's seen multiple decades, any dog person like me knows that the most valuable thing in the world is spending time with your pet. The Farmer's Dog can help you keep them healthy, which can give you more quality years with them.
The Farmer's Dog makes and delivers fresh, healthy dog food. It's recommended by vets, it's nutritionally balanced, and it's made from human-grade ingredients in a safe, clean kitchen. I recently got a new pupper. I mean, she is not a baby. She is 5 years old, but looks like a puppy, and everyone is in love with her when I walk her. She used to need me to sprinkle like turkey on top of her old dog food, but with the Farmer's Dog delivered fresh, healthy to my door, she loves it and is so obsessed with it.
My dog has digestive issues and he's got some joint issues, and a fresh diet has been found to have all sorts of benefits, from a healthier coat and skin to better breath, even easier digestion. A healthy diet isn't just important for humans, it's really important for dogs too.
For listeners, you can get 50% off your first box by going to thefarmersdog.com/cult. Go to thefarmersdog.com/cult for 50% off your first box. That's thefarmersdog.com/cult for 50% off your first box.
Thank you all so much for joining our much requested episode on the Cult of PTA Moms. Could you first of all just introduce yourself and your work to our listeners?
I'm Angie, and we are the co-hosts of I've Had It podcast.
I'm Jennifer, and I'm Angie's co-host, where we air the daily grievances of being a human being out amongst other human beings in the general public.
Otherwise known as shit talking.
We've gotten so many requests for this topic. I mean, off the bat, can you talk about what you think is culty about the PTA in general? And culty can refer to things that can be positive or negative. Like we always talk about how like community is a great aspect of cult. So, you know, feel free to take it in whatever direction you think.
So Pumps has 3 kids. I have 2. And we're in the twilight of our motherhood. We each still have one child at home and the rest are in college. And I will tell you, motherhood is fantastic. The worst thing about being a mother are other mothers. There's no question about it. I have never been in the PTA. I will never be in the PTA. All of these moms can have it. And the official PTA is not as pronounced as it was when we were growing up in the 80s. They've kind of tried to modernize it in a sense. With our kids, it's like a mom meeting or a mom get together. They try to make it sound more casual, but I don't fall for this. I know exactly what they're trying to do with this kind of language. I know exactly what road it's going to lead me down. And I genuinely want no part of it, because I think the most important thing about being a mother is who you are when you're at home with your children. Mm-hmm. All these PTA moms are out mothering each other to each other, and the kids aren't even privy to any of the stuff that's going on, except for the fact that maybe their mom's not available to do something with them because she's too busy baking 950,000 homemade cookies.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It is so cult-like to be so distracted by the activities that you're doing and so invested in the quote-unquote mission that you kind of lose sight of the fundamental purpose why you're there. And that seems to be what you're kind of describing.
Right.
My children went to a school where the parents are up at the school all the time. They go to all the kids' parties. They go to all the kids' assemblies. They go to all the pep assemblies. They're flittering around the offices. They're constantly at the school. And so when my kids were little and they would say, Mom, why don't you come to our assemblies? I'm like, because I have more to do than be at your school for an assembly that I don't give a shit about. Yeah. Like, you're a kid, you're in school, it's your assembly. I don't need to be there. But with all these power moms, and they're always, planning the parties and sending out emails and who's going to bring the snacks, and they go on the field trips, like, your kid is like, well, I guess my mom's just not involved. And it's like, no, your mom's just being a normal grown up. It's the moms that are there all the time that are fucked up.
And those moms fuck us. Those moms fuck the normal moms like Pumps and me that have careers, and we've already been to school. Right. We already graduated from school. So that assumes that you don't have to go back to school. So why these moms want to go hang around at the school is beyond me. I mean, totally beyond me, but that's theirs to sort out with their psychiatrist, right? Yeah. But these moms fuck us because when my kids were in lower school, Roman or Dylan, those are my sons, would come home and go, well, such and such's mom went on the field trip with us today. And I'm like, God damn it, fucking Brenda, why are you always running around making everybody look like shit? So I told my kids, I will do one thing per year. One. So one year I picked and we went to some like museum for my youngest son. And then sure enough, one of the moms like texts me, hey, do you want to ride together? And I thought, I'm already diving off into this pool with no water in it. Why not ride with this power mom? Biggest mistake of my life. Get in the car with this woman. And it is just a flex. She's got like 5 kids. And all I heard about the entire time was how smart her kids were, all these activities they're enrolled in. I was so exhausted for her children by the time we got to this museum. I'm like, there is not going to be enough dollars in a bank account to get her kids through therapy because she's had them signed up for so much shit in their lives they've been unable to live. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, these moms, they fuck everyone over, and I've had it with these moms. Had it. We're not above it,
No, we're not.
No, I love the way that you talk about how they like fuck you and they like fuck everyone else, because I remember being a kid and asking the same question, like, why isn't my mom on this field trip? Or like, why isn't my mom volunteering to teach me timetables in the hallway? And it's like, it's because she has a job.
I just find it fascinating that there are these culty us versus them dynamics that have been created between the moms who are in the PTA and volunteer at the school, and that's like their main gig, and there's a way to be way too invested, and that's what we're talking about today, and the moms who don't do that, because like there doesn't have to be a war, but I can't help but think like the societal structures that have like disserved women for so long have like created this conflict to distract us all, like there doesn't have to be this war, and yet there is.
Well, you say that, but let me tell you what just happened to me about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So my son, Roman, is a basketball player, but he signed up to be the manager for his school's soccer team. So what being a manager for a soccer team consists of is Roman sitting on the bench with a clipboard, which means that Jennifer, that's me, I'm not going to attend one soccer game because I don't need to go watch Roman sit on a bench. Now, if he were the star soccer player, even, like maybe played 3 minutes, I would be at that game, right? But he's just sitting on the bench. He's the soccer manager. I'm not going to those games. So this power mom, she texts me, and they won state championship. She's like, hey, Roman didn't come get measured for his ring. Roman's 16 years old. Okay. Roman drives a car. He has a cell phone. And I'm thinking, like, first of all, why is this bitch texting me? This is a Roman problem. This isn't like Roman bullied somebody on the playground. I need a parent to intervene. So I text Roman. I'm like, Roman, do you want this soccer ring? He was like, no, I just did that to get service hours. I don't really care about the soccer team. So I respond to her like, hey, Roman didn't want the ring. She's like, well, are you coming to the banquet? I mean, this is da-da-da-da-da. And I said, Roman was just the manager, so I don't think we're going to go to the banquet. Banquets are another thing I've had it with.
Oh, yeah.
And she literally starts shaming me, trying to make me feel bad for not going to this banquet. And then you would not believe what this woman did. She made 20 posters, 20 for 16 and 17-year-olds. That's like all these candy bars are attached to it that say a word like you might snicker, and it's a Snickers bar, and get the Skittles. And she made this whole thing. And then Roman comes home from this banquet with a stack 2 feet high of pictures, plaques, awards for being the soccer team manager. And so I'm just removed myself from it. These moms can have it. They can group me. They can make all these candy bar posters, fucking swing for the fences. That's fine. If there's a problem with a 16-year-old child that involves behavior that a parent needs to insert themselves in, I'm going to be the first to help mitigate that situation. Roman not getting fit for a ring that he doesn't want is not a Jennifer problem. That's a fucking Roman problem. And I'm trying to raise kids to be autonomous and be adults that don't get so stressed out when they get to college or have a job for the first time. And I'm telling you, these kids of these power moms, they're all going to be pussies. Every single one of them.
Oh my God.
I love
strong
you.
statements.
I do think it does say it's like a classic therapy situation when you see the way that this woman is kind of probably taking out something that's going on in her personal life out on you, you know, of like the anger of like texting and being like, why wasn't he fitted? Does he not want the, you know, it's like, to me, it seems like one of those like classic situations where like, I mean, it's frustrating, but in a way I'm like, if they have nothing else to do, I mean, I guess they're kind of treating it like a job, you know?
I'll tell you what it is. You're right. It is a therapy situation. And here's my diagnosis. She's pissed after all 17 years of signing up to do too much shit.
It sounds exhausting.
Candy bar poster boards, 95,000 plaques. She's hosting this banquet. She's texting all these moms. And then she thinks, I wonder what that fucking Jennifer Welch is doing. And then she Googles it. Well, she's on a podcast shit talking. God damn it. What have I done for these last 16 or 17 years? So she passive aggressively kind of took this out on me, because at the end of the day, like if you put all your eggs in one basket, and this is really never discussed. When you become a mom, you still have to do other things. You still have a wife, you're still a friend, you still have a career, or, you know, whatever it is, but your entire life cannot be your children, because that's unfair to your children. It's unfair to put that kind of burden on them.
Yeah.
So when this power mom's kids leave, there's no question she is going to be grinding up Xanax and snorting it, because she's not going to be able to cope, because she's going to have nothing to do.
It's so interesting because you're talking about motherhood, but I hear you describe the challenges of cult membership, because it really is the idea of like investing all of your eggs in one basket. You like completely commit yourself to this one ideology, this one group, this one belief. And then when it all crashes down, you find yourself with nothing. And so I think the PTA probably has some recruitment strategies that make it seem like you should put all of your eggs in that basket and that group will bring you life fulfillment and purpose. But you're saying, you know, it's important to diversify. You keep saying the word power mom, and I want to talk more about the power structure of the PTA. Can you sort of talk about the hierarchies that you've witnessed and who holds power in that organization?
Well, I think the power moms are just a group of women that are self-appointed, that they're going to be reliving all of their high school, elementary school, middle school over through their child. And they get so invested in doing nice things for the teachers, going up to school and volunteering, doing all the shit work nobody else wants to do, so that their kid will be granted preferential treatment. Power moms and the PTA moms, pretty much the same thing, just not as organized.
The PTA is not as prevalent as it was when we grew up in the 80s. Like as far as like join the PTA, it is guised as this like parent association, not really parent teacher association so much anymore, but there's a clique of power moms at every school, because I don't think any of the schools that my children attended had an official PTA.
Oh, interesting.
But for sure, there is a group of power moms that helicopter over the school, much like the United States military would over, you know, Iraq. It's a very similar hovering type style, and it's a very aggressive style hovering. So you can say PTA, but it's more power moms, because some schools might have an official PTA, but Pumps and I have always called them the power moms, and they are a cult.
They also form an alliance where they get into the children's business. They gossip about the couples that are in high school, or they talk down to other power moms about certain children and certain parents and parenting choices. So they've self-appointed themselves the judge, jury, and executioner for high school kids when they're grown-ass women hanging out at high school.
Really toxic.
And I love like the language that you're using, like the military example. And then you're also using the word alliance. And you're like, what essentially these moms are doing is they're creating like a political influence at the school so that their kids could get into like certain classes or with certain teachers. And it's like, I mean, I remember in high school being in like, there were 2 AP Lit teachers. You know, it was like a classic movie situation. There was like the one that was like young, hot teacher. He gave everyone A's. And then there was like the old teacher that had been there for decades. And if you got him, you were screwed for like your senior year. You know, you actually had to like read a million books. And, you know, the kids with parents who had influence, they got into the easier class. Right. And that has like long-term effects on like what college you get into and things like that. So it's like, I think it's important to just highlight that you were saying it's not just the PTA, because it's like not every school has a high functioning PTA, but it's these like helicopter parents that have like massive influence.
My kids, when they went to preschool to 8th grade, they went to a school that did not allow any PTA, any parent organization whatsoever. And so it was awesome because I have a career and I dropped my kids off. They went to after school club, and a lot of the other parents that sent their kids to this school had careers. And so all the kids stayed until like 4:30 or 5 whenever the parents got off work. There was zero parent anything. Like you were not allowed to do anything at the school. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. So then that school only goes to 8th grade. So when my oldest son went to high school in 9th grade, I'm all of a sudden on like 95,000 group me texts. And I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm more involved in communicating with parents now than when my child was 5 years old. And so it was a real culture shock for me going from the school that only was preschool to 8th and then it ends, going to this high school. And my kid drove himself to the high school. And I'm like thinking, you know, this is going to be a piece of cake. And these moms are, you know, just raining down on me to do all of these things. Like, have you bought Dylan's homecoming ticket yet? And I'm like, that's a Dylan problem. Dylan needs to buy his homecoming ticket. Like when I went to school, if I needed something or I was responsible for something, my mother put that on me to do. And so I do the same with my kids. But these moms, they do every single thing.
They're overcomplicating the process. Yeah, that's culty too, because it reminds me a lot of corporate America that sort of infuses all this bureaucracy and systems and red tape. For what purpose? Just to have something to do, to create culty dynamics, to create power structures where there needn't be? That's very interesting.
It's this bizarre flex that goes on, particularly with moms. And then if you transfer that over to once you get to sports, then you have the grandstanding dads. And the dads at sports events are completely psychotic beyond anything you can imagine. And you're talking about 6th grade, 7th grade basketball or baseball or soccer. And you would think that this father is the father of LeBron James. It's unbelievable. There's fights with referees. Yes. There are fights among parents. The screaming of the worst job in America, no doubt, is to be an umpire or a referee for a school-aged child sport team. Yeah. It would have to be the most thankless job ever. I mean, they get their asses reamed nonstop.
I'm glad you mentioned that it also happens with dads, because it's not just women, you know, it happens with everyone.
Yeah, we got to shout out the cult leader dads. Well, I guess they're cult leaders and cult followers at the same time, because we cover a lot of sort of female-focused cults on this show, but we can't deny that men are just as susceptible to that type of fanaticism as women are. It's just more accepted and not as critiqued and not as marked, because we just like by default expect fanaticism when it's dressed up in like a masculine suit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have definitely in my time on my kids' benches at sporting events, I've seen the men go crazy. But I've seen a couple women that could put the men to shame. I mean, we're talking like middle school age kids, and they're screaming and scratching at the ref. They get kicked out. We just had last summer in one of the suburbs of Oklahoma City, a parent went up and started fist fighting the referee of a middle school basketball game on a Saturday. He had to be taken to the hospital, broke his jaw, broke his ocular bone. Blood was all over the court. And we're like, so this is what you want your kid to emulate?
That's a get the fuck out. That's a get the fuck out.
I mean, it was just, it's fucking bananas how these men and women too, but more particularly men, I don't know if they're living through their child. Like I was a shitty athlete, but I want my kid to be the state champion of everything.
Yeah.
Or if they just honestly believe their child is the second coming of, Michael Jordan.
And honestly, there's a lot of delusions of grandeur when you get to the sports, especially with the dads, that they have their kid, let's call him Billy. And Billy is maybe 17 years old and Billy's 5'9". Okay.
Right.
And Billy's playing basketball and they are certain that Billy is going to be a D1 basketball player. And it's just never going to happen.
That makes me laugh so hard.
Completely fine. He makes 3 baskets a game, maybe 1 steal, but there's no fucking way this kid is going to play D1 basketball. And what's so sad about it is I think that a lot of parents project this onto their children, and it's the parents' wish for them. Yeah. I wish for my child to be a star athlete. And maybe the child wants to be in drama. Maybe the child wants to be in, like a professional video gamer or whatever. But the parents have projected so much of what their vision is for the child. And that's why I think you see with our kids' generation, the anxiety rates are through the roof, because are we allowing them at any point to stop and just enjoy their life?
Everything you're describing, like the competition aspect, the delusion, the overly optimistic desire to ascend some sort of hierarchy to show everybody that you're doing an amazing thing in your life. I think these same motives that drive these power moms to be the ultimate PTA super queen or whatever, or the dads to be violent on the soccer field, they're the exact same things that drive people to join cults. And that's why cults thrive in this country in particular, right? It's like that Protestant capitalism, gold rush, manifest destiny, and it looks different on different people, but it's cultishness across the board.
And also what you're highlighting to me is like something we talk about on the podcast all the time as well, which is like the cult of the American dream. Like you're talking about these dads that think that like their son is going to make it into the NBA, and like the probability of that statistically is like 0.0001%, but we're sold this idea that like our children could be, like you said, the next coming of Christ. And it's like, not gonna happen, my guy.
And how fucked up a culture are we that we think that monetary and career success is the equivalent of the second coming of a religious figure? That's a cult.
There's so much over capitalism in all of this that drives and fuels the whole thing. Yeah. Like when you sign your kid up to play a sport, or if you're a mom that's actively in the PTA, then it's a fundraising component. We have to have all of this gear. And it's just this, there's so much capitalism that is thread through all of it, where what is lost is just connecting. Connecting on a human connection is one of the biggest things we can do to fight depression. And there's very little connecting, and there's a lot more one-upsmanship, more spending each other into a frenzy. And so I do think that social media, hyped up capitalism, all of this stuff coming to fruition. Pumps and I grew up in the 80s. Our moms never were at the school. Never. Ever.
Yeah.
They were never at school. This is a new kind of thing that's happening. And it doesn't surprise me one bit that these kids have so much anxiety because their parents have told them, you are my entire world. My mom loves me. My mom loves me unconditionally. If I needed a kidney, she'd give it to me right now. But I know that she has other things in her life. I know I'm one of the biggest things, but I know she has a whole slew of baskets that she has to fill with eggs. I'm one of the biggest ones, and my siblings are, but I know I'm not her entire world.
You mentioned a bit about like the gossip mom. We found like this article on today.com. Like there's some very clear stereotypes that like you kind of described, there's like the type A mom, the overachiever mom. Then there's like the gossip mom, the wine o'clock somewhere mom, the drama queen mom. Can you talk a little bit more about the archetypes that exist in the PTA?
There always is kind of an HBIC with all the schools. There's always one HBIC. And this woman would be like, for me personally, a person that I would dodge at all costs, that I would want nothing to do with. And I would hope that she would say, oh, Jennifer's not involved in anything at all. And I would wear that with a badge of honor, because there always is that. It's like the woman that called me about the ring. I'm like, why do you fucking care if Roman gets a ring or not? Like, how on earth does that have anything to do with your life? It's a constant flex to point out, look at what a better mom I am. Right. Look at how much better my kid is than your kid. And it's all a really real thing. And it's a real dynamic that's being spread. But when I go to basketball games, half the time I don't even sit by other parents because I I can't tolerate it. It's just, I don't like small talk. I don't like to hear people flex about their kids. I know people don't want to hear about my kids. And so my husband and I just kind of sit by ourselves.
You spoke about this a little bit about how they're kind of like rebranding and trying to make it sound more casual for the 21st century. And we talked a little bit in our discussion before we started this interview about why the PTA has shrunk since the 60s and 70s and 80s. But could you talk a little bit more about the recruitment tactics that the PTA uses to try and get other people into the organization, even though it is dwindling?
I had an experience when my child was in kindergarten. He was my oldest. It was the first one. I'm Raha. And a girl that I knew called me and said, hey, we'd like for you to volunteer on this board. It's going to be super easy. You'll just be in charge of the school auction. It's no big deal. You know, we would just love to have you. Well, since I was like a newbie, I was like so flattered, like, oh my gosh, they are wanting to do this. That is so nice. Ended up being the biggest, most torturous thing that has ever happened to me on the planet. Like 80 hours a week for 3 months, trying to get all this shit done. It was an absolute disaster. So I think no one goes in saying, we're going to work your dick in the dirt. This bullshit up at school. They make you think like, oh my gosh, you know, like, so I felt like super flattered at the time. And then I realized it was just a con job. So I would assume it was a lot of con job. One of my favorite stories about the Power Mom PTA is they always want to have tons of committees. You know, we're going to sell cookies on Thursday. So let's have 47 committee meetings about it so we can talk about it, you know, and that's just like, if you can't fucking figure out how to make cookies by yourself and sell them on Thursday, you got major problems. But so one mom that I really admired, her children were older than mine. We used to have I guess we still do at my kids' school, a geranium sale. Like you sell like gorgeous geraniums. I guess they're really pretty, whatever. I've never bought one. So one year, the woman that they tapped to be in charge of the geranium sales, they bring her in for one of these committee meetings. And she was uber wealthy. And so she's sitting there and everybody's going around giving their opinion of the geraniums on the committee. And she looks at him and she's like, how much money do you have to raise for this committee? And they were like, well, you know, last year we raised $8,000. So we'd really like to raise $9,000 this year. She opened her purse. She wrote a check for $9,000 and said, here it is.
Stop.
I'm done. And I was like, I fucking worship the ground she walks on.
Oh, man.
She's like, you're not going to
so
committee
good.
me. You're not going to bullshit me about these geraniums. And here's the deal. The geranium committee was running around going, geraniums are back after last year when we couldn't have geraniums. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of con jobbing in the salesmanship.
Here's how it gets you now, because it has been so modernized. It starts with this benign group me. And it's like parents of the class of 2025.
Right.
You get invited to this group me and it's like, oh, welcome, Jennifer. We're so happy to have your son at the school. This is the parent group me, blah, blah, blah. So I'm looking at it because my son had finished that school to 8th grade and then he went, you know, to high school. And I'm looking at it and I am just like, okay, it's not helpful. But then they all start flexing on it. Like, I'm going to do this for homecoming and I'm going to host this and I'm going to do this. And then just like Pump said, then they start the fundraising things. And then you have people that are on this committee and on this committee and on this committee. I simply, from the jump, I'm like, I'm happy to make a donation to the school. I'm happy to make a donation to the basketball team. Beyond that, I do not have time to give.
Yeah, it's like, how much do I have to pay not to interact with you people?
Right, exactly.
It reminds me so much of like reply all on email corporate culture.
Yes.
It's like you are trying to prove to HR or to whoever the exec on the email thread is that like you're doing the most. But the most like wild part about all of that is that's like, you're not going to get a bonus. You're not going to get a promotion.
What is the fucking point? That is so sort of existentially threatening. Like, why is anyone doing all of this?
You said that the PTA numbers were declining, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the deal. It's 100% worse now. The actual affiliate organization, the PTA, somebody might be able to research that and put out an article. By no means does this mean that parents are not grandstanding and showboating at the schools.
Right.
It is 10,000 times worse now. We grew up in the 80s and it was peak PTA time.
Right.
It is horrible. I mean, it is, I'll remind your listener, motherhood is fun. It's awesome. It's frustrating. It's the greatest thing and the worst thing that ever happened to you all at the exact same time. The worst thing about it on the planet are the other parents.
That's such a good point that like even though the official PTA organization itself might be decreasing in size, this type of phenomenon, the hyper competition and the grandstanding, like you were saying, the cultishness has only gotten worse. And I can't help but think that like just the general social stratification in the culture right now and social media as an addition to the mix and everything has made the cultishness worse, even if PTA is not stamped on the front of the letterhead. So this has been such an interesting conversation, but we really want to transition into a little game with the both of you.
So the game is called Culty Quotes. And it's where we read you a quote from a cult leader in history, you know, one that was real and, you know, hashtag bad, and then a PTA mom. And then you guess who it was.
They all kind of sound like cult leaders said them, but you're going to have to guess whether a cult leader from history said them or the official PTA website said them.
This is going to be fun. Okay.
The first quote goes, "Recognize the power of your intuition, reclaim your voice, and rekindle your relationships with your children and yourself, even if you haven't yet become a mother."
I'm going PTA.
PTA.
So that quote was actually stated by a cultish leader named Kelly Brogan, who is an extremely controversial, damaging conspiracy theorist out there right now. So I would classify that as a cultish leader, but she actually might be in the PTA. I don't know.
The two are not mutually exclusive.
That's so true.
True.
Okay, next quote. "This association was founded by lifelong friends who believe it could help you reach your full potential and provide a better life for you and your family."
I'd say cult.
You are correct. It is Amway, one of the world's biggest multi-level marketing.
Yes. Yes.
So the next quote goes, "Our founders represented women of imagination and courage. They had a simple idea: to improve the lives and future of all children. They understood the power of individual action and took action to change the world for all children."
PTA.
PTA.
100%.
You are correct.
They really lay it on thick, though, on the website.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds religious.
Yeah, these quotes are tough because, like, inherently, like, a lot of them are going to have the word children in them. But I mean, children of God. So, you know, things could be cool.
I know, cults love getting at the children.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Next quote. "You belong in our association, and so do your relatives, neighbors, and friends. Spread the word. For less than 3 cents a day, you can become a member."
Cult.
Cult.
PTA.
PTA.
Really?
Straight from the PTA
That
website.
is crazy.
That is totally culty, ladies.
That
Yeah.
is definitely culty.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
The next one goes, "The people who find this path are meant to. And when we work together, you have entered the path of unconditional love."
Cult.
Cult.
Yes. This is actually a brand new call.
Friend of the hot off the press.
Hot off the presses. Yes. One of a friend of the pod, a guy named Jennings Brown, who like reports on cults for a living. He just broke the news of this cult. Massive news. It's called Liana Shanti's Lemurian Mystery School. Look it up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I can't wait.
I love a good cult deep dive.
Okay. Last quote. "We have been an ardent advocate for bettering the lives of every child because we know we cannot only focus on our own children."
PTA, you know why? One thing we didn't discuss about the PTA, it encourages women to be busybodies. It encourages codependency and toxic behavior. All of these power moms are the ultimate busybodies. So that quote that you just read, I immediately knew it was PTA because it not just our children, but other children's. That's really like no therapist would really advise you to meddle into somebody else's childhood unless, of course, they were in danger.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love how you're like the cult detective with the PTA specifically. You're like, and that is a sign of da-da-da-da-da in the PTA.
Yeah.
Hey,
I love
we've
it.
been in the trenches with these women for 20 years. And a couple of episodes on our podcast, we declared war on the power moms. We're tired of like preschool graduation, kindergarten graduation. It's stupid.
It's
like
stupid.
you should graduate from those things.
Right.
And so we want to oppose that type of over celebration because I think it's exacerbating adult anxiety in like
That's
18
so
to 25-year-olds because everything's been celebrated. And then when you become an adult, it's really difficult. Nobody's celebrating you anymore. And so we know that when we want to eliminate these things, our opponent in this will be the power moms.
Incredible. Well, that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for coming on Sounds Like a Cult.
We enjoyed being here.
Yes, we're so excited that you had the time that you came on the show. If our listeners want to keep up with you or your work or join your cult, where can they do that?
Well, our cult is available for all people that like to shit talk at I've Had It podcast. Pumps' Instagram is at pumps, and mine is at Ms. Welch, Mizz Welch. And if you're curious, like what I do for real life, it's at Jennifer Welch Designs. I'm an interior designer.
Amazing. Oh my God, I need one.
Amazing.
Cool.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
So, Amanda, out of the 3 cult categories, live your life, watch your back, or get the fuck out. What do you think the cult of PTA moms falls under?
I would say it's a solid watch your back. Because if you look at our sort of casual checklist of what makes something a dangerous cult versus an innocent one, some of the boxes are checked. I mean, it is intensely competitive. There are these us versus them vibes between like the working moms and the volunteering moms. It can get very toxic. There are unhealthy power dynamics and exclusion. But at the same time, it is a completely volunteer organization where if you leave, you might lose some friends, you might lose some clout, but you're not going to fear for your life. So in that way, I would say, much like being a mother in America in general, it is a watch your back.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's a watch your back also because you have so much influence over the education and policies and regulation around children's education that it's like you have to make sure that you're being attentive to how you could positively or negatively influence like the culture of a school.
Yeah, that is so true. Like another red flag with the cult of the PTA, much like many dangerous cults, is like it's hard to tell who's in power, who's trying to gain power. The hierarchies are just like so culty and gross, or they can be. So yeah, I think we've landed on a verdict. It's a solid watch your back.
Solid watch your back.
That is our show.
Thanks so much for listening.
We'll be back with a new cult next week.
But in the meantime,
stay culty, but not too culty.
Sounds Like a Cult was created, hosted, and produced by Isa Medina and Amanda Montel. Our theme music is by Casey Cole.
This episode was edited and mixed by Jordan Moore of The Pod Cabin.
To join our cult, follow us on Instagram at Sounds Like a Cult Pod.
I'm on Instagram at Amanda_Montel, and feel free to check out my books, Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, and Word Slut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language.
And I'm on Instagram at Isa Medina, ISAAMEDINAA, where you can find tickets to my live stand-up comedy shows or tell me where to perform.
We also have a Patreon, and we would appreciate your support there at patreon.com/soundslikeacult. And if you like our show, feel free to give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
And if you don't like our show, rate other podcasts the way you'd rate us.
Oh my God.